Oh, yes. Hello and welcome to Triple Take Cinema. I am Kyle. I'm here with my co hosts, Dustin and Alex, as always. Repeat listeners, we love you. Thank you for coming back to the show. We are talking about what I thought was a theme of, movies that take place in small spaces and are kind of like confined to a room. And then I was like, wait a second, maybe this is just a week about Jodie Foster. And then I was like, wait a second, I think this is just a week about movies about parenting. So here we are, and I will tell you about the three movies that we actually watched for this episode, which I was very excited to do, and I enjoyed thoroughly. We watched Carnage, which is a Roman Polanski movie based on a French play. We watched Room, starring Brie Larson, and we watched Panic Room, my original Fincher enjoyment, which also stars Jodie Foster, and it kind of got me really into Forrest Whitaker when I was a youth when I started watching this stuff. So yeah, those are the three movies that we got into this week. I'm excited to discuss them. I'm going to kick it to Alex. Alex, what was your familiarity with this triad?
Yeah, so Panic Room, I feel like infamously from our text threads, is a major Fincher blind spot for me. Really enjoyed checking that off the list. Room with Brie Larson, I think I was vaguely aware of its existence, but didn't know much about the plot or the shape of it or even the single setting premise. And Carnage was not on my radar whatsoever. Did not know there was a film directed by Roman Polanski and starring Jodie Foster, Kate Winslet, Christoph Waltz, and John C. Reilly as our quartet. So that was a revelation for me. Did not know it existed. Dustin, what about you?
Yeah, I much in the same way as Kyle, as far as Panic Room goes. That was my first. I think that was my first Fincher foray, or did I see Fight Club first? I probably saw Panic Room first because I feel like I saw Panic Room in the theaters, and absolutely loved it. That was probably my first like significant exposure to Forrest Whitaker, understanding who he was. Um, I don't think I knew, and honestly, was Jared Leto even like important at that point? I don't know. I fucking hate Jared Leto like with every ounce in my body.
Yeah, to
um
that I would ask, is he important now?
yeah, well, fair, but was he more known then than he is now?
Valid.
Certainly not more, but was he as known as he is now? Probably not. Anyways, I do think he's really good in this movie, but he plays a total dick in this movie, which is
Yep.
like he's playing himself. And then also, I don't know about you guys, but Panic Room's really my sole exposure to Dwight Yoakam as an actor or as an individual in existing. But I know he's a fairly accomplished musician, but I only know him as Raoul from Panic Room. Um,
He has a
big,
great turn as a doctor in the Jason Statham movie Crank.
Mm.
oh,
My
that's right.
other
Yeah.
Dwight Yoakam exposure.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Oh man, those Crank movies are something else for sure.
Yeah,
I don't I
we
don't I
we
wonder
might.
if those would hold up the test of time from like being drunk in college watching those, cuz those were great for those moments, but I feel like going back to it uh
Dangerous. It's a dangerous game going back to Crank
yeah.
in
Anyways,
every
so
sense of that sentence.
so yeah, Panic Room, big fan. Carnage, I think I had maybe seen it in like just flicking through streaming and was like, well, like not a huge turnoff or anything. Didn't really associate it with Roman Polanski or anything like that. And then Room, I was familiar with. I'm a big Brie Larson fan. I really love, if you've never seen it, Short Term 12, which is like her
Oh,
first leading role. Like, I love that movie so much. Um, so Room had definitely like been on my radar, but it just kind of felt like, oh, like kind of a uh,
it's a tough
certain
one.
like kind of like, I mean, it's kind of one of those movies where it's like, do I really like want this story? I mean, kind of a similar way. A big blind spot I have is I've never seen Schindler's List,
Mm.
and I know I need to, but like I have friends, a couple like that I'm friends with and watch a lot of movies with, and the two of them watched it recently and were telling me about it, and they were like, yeah, we watched Schindler's List because we saw it was leaving Netflix, and we were like, we should probably watch this. And they're like, yeah, like I don't want to say I'm glad I watched it, but like I'm not glad I watched it, but glad is not a right word for it. And I'm like, yeah, like it's the kind of thing where like you really have to like be in a mood to know that you're going to feel even shittier coming out of it, but that's not necessarily an indicative of a poor movie kind of a thing. And that's how I kind of felt about Room. And like, I had never been in the mood to watch it, but it was never because I was like, oh, I think this movie's going to be bad. It's just kind of like, oh, it's the story I really don't feel like I need to spend 2 hours with. But
Right.
I'm really glad we watched it for this podcast because I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it for what it was. And I think, Alex, you put it lightly, like it had a softer touch than I thought it was going to, which I appreciated because I didn't really need like truly like the world is a terrible place when I can just like pull up the news and get that from there. So yeah, that's my exposure to the three of these.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably both selling ourselves a little short on the David Fincher, but I'll maybe speak and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dustin. I loved Seven and knew and obviously like had seen Seven multiple times well before Panic Room had come out, but it was not at a time where I knew or cared about David Fincher, right? Like it was not like I didn't watch Seven and wait for the credits to roll and start checking boxes on the movies of directors I had seen and all that stuff. Like I just wasn't there as a movie watcher. And so I feel like Panic Room was the first time I saw a movie knowing the director being like, oh, I'm excited for this movie because this director is supposed to be very good type of thing. But yeah, I had seen Panic Room. I saw it in the theaters. I've seen it multiple times over the past few years. I hadn't watched it in a while, maybe 5, 6, 7 years. So I was kind of excited to get back to it and use the idea of like some movies that take place in smaller spaces to kind of put that in there. I had seen Carnage a long, long, long time ago when it came out. And this was Carnage was actually, I think, maybe my first experience with Christoph Waltz, maybe my second after Inglourious Bastards. I can't remember exactly the timeline, but yeah, and I've always been a Kate Winslet fan and a John C. Reilly fan. Jodie Foster was kind of the odd person out in that one for me, but I think she did very well. We'll get into that. And it was very fun watching Carnage now after having been a parent, whereas watching that before when I was very far away from parenthood in every sense of that word. Um, and yeah, Room was my blind spot, and Room was one that I actually didn't know. I didn't know the.
The director,
Uh,
because right
I
before
didn't
we hit
certainly didn't know
record,
the
you
director.
didn't know the
I
director.
certainly didn't know the director. Some would say I still don't. But I didn't know the director, but I also didn't know the kind of. I knew like this idea that there was a woman living with a child in a very small space they couldn't get out of, but I didn't know anything about the larger context of how they got in or why they were there or why they couldn't get out. So I didn't have the same trepidation maybe about watching it that you guys maybe would have experienced or I mean trepidation is probably not the right strong word, but just kind of like it just doesn't, you just don't choose that on a Saturday night all that often. So I'm happy to be able to push it through. I could never get my wife to watch it because I think she had actually looked it up and was like, that sounds terrible. um and so yeah, I'm that was my big blind spot on this one, but I was happy to return to a couple movies that I had not seen in a long time. um Kind of when it comes to all that. So yeah, and I have a very weird thing where sometimes people don't want to watch depressing movies when they're feeling low, and I am the exact opposite, and I go hard in the other direction. So it's like,
You
oh,
gotta marinate in that shit.
you got to marinate, but also like and so right now I'm watching a lot of like ER in the pit, and my wife can't handle it. She's like, everything is bad. It's happening on the show. It's just like a never ending bad. I'm like, well, yeah, it's an ER. There's literally nothing good that happens there. And two, uh, all these people are much worse off than whatever like crap I'm dealing with. Like my stuff is insignificant compared to the life and death situations these people are dealing with. So I tend to get into the shit when I'm trying to feel better, which is a very bizarre thing. But yeah, I feel like let's get right into Room. I feel like let's start with Room and then go Panic and then go to Carnage because I'm kind of curious to end there. But I did also, I think I mentioned this in the intro, but it did strike me while we were watching Carnage, um, how much all these movies are about parenting.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the common thread here. Like,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, loosely like The Room, your original intent of The Room, but ironically, Room is the movie that loses that the strongest
yeah,
of the three. I feel like, um,
yes, absolutely.
and then yeah, obviously, no Jodie Foster in Room, and there's no half half-assing that. So I think
No,
the parenting note is the commonality between the three
it
of these.
really is. Well, Dustin, give me your thoughts on Room. I'll kick it off to you.
Yeah, so I feel like, it's not funny. The term, in that colloquial term of, it's funny that you feel like you said that you weren't really as familiar with like the background of the story here, because I feel like I always assumed this was, what's her name? It wasn't I want to say it was Duggar, but it wasn't a Duggar person. There's that famous story of a woman who this happened to, and she escaped sometime in the 2010s. I want to say, if not the 2010s, it was like 2008, 2009. And she had a kid with her captor, and she lived in a shed in their backyard. But with her, it got to the point where the captor, um, her captor may have had like a wife too, but he like let her go to the store and stuff. And she like, I don't think it was actually Stockholm syndrome diagnosed, but like essentially like same kind of deal where she like was somewhat brainwashed into like not running away or escaping, or was beholden to her child that she had, or whatever it was. So like, I knew going into this that that was kind of the theme of the story. um I don't What I didn't know going into this was that the escape was going to happen, and it was going to be halfway through the film. Like, I guess I had assumed it was going to be either like the crux of the film was her escaping with her son, um, or alternatively, halfway through the film she escapes, and then the second half becomes like a courtroom drama or something like that. I thought that was really interesting. The fact that as soon as, like, even before she escaped, ultimately once her son escaped, that was the last we saw of, what was it, old Nick that they called him, the guy who abducted her. Like, that was it. Yeah. Presumably he got arrested alive, um, and went to court and everything. But we heard a little bit of that from her dad, but like we didn't really. That wasn't any part of the story that they sought to tell or anything like that. Um, yeah, I enjoyed this. Was really I thought the two strongest performances were her mother, Joan Allen. I thought was really, really good. And then Jacob Tremblay is just an amazing actor. And have either of you seen Doctor Sleep?
No,
The
Yes.
So he's it's kind of a bit part. It's not a it's He's not the main character in Doctor Sleep or anything, but he is like, like his character is like murdered in Doctor Sleep, and like not in a pleasant way. And I remember they were like, what's her name, the actress who plays Rose the Hat, like the main villain in Doctor Sleep, um, did like an interview where she said she was like so distraught from like the scene where she was like torturing his character and how well he played it, and how trippy it was for her. Like, as soon as the director called cut, like Jacob Tremblay like just sat up and it's like, all right guys, let's go get some coffee. Or like, it was just kind of, and I mean, he's older in Doctor Sleep, but he's still like 12. And just, I mean, it just kind of hones into like, yeah, like for a movie like this that's telling the story not just about the woman that was kept uh, held captive, but her son that she had, and how important he was to the story and her story and everything. Like, you needed a kid who could like bat 1,000 for this, and this was that kid. I can't think of another like child actor today that I feel like could, in my lifetime, that I feel like could have performed this as well, and just felt as real and authentic in that role. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like this was, it wasn't as, the subject matter is heavy no matter how you look at it, but it wasn't as rooted in the negative of that experience, where I think the only positive that came out of this experience for her was having her son, and loving him the way that she did, and for who he was and not where he came from, kind of a thing. And um, their relationship was such a huge highlight of the movie that like that softer touch kind of came in that regard. It was really about the two of them and their relationship and how they helped each other survive, even though Leo the kid didn't. Or no, not Leo. I should have this up. Jack, right? Yeah. Uh, Jack not being not knowing how his like what his mother did to keep him alive, kind of a thing. But the fact the two of them played off each other so well, I thought was so powerful and enjoyable to kind of watch and just see his exploration and openness come to the world in that way. And then Brie Larson was just kind of fantastic through and through with everything she did, but like her interactions with her mom once she got out, I thought were really strong. I really did like. I'm not a huge fan of William H Macy. Like, I don't know. I think sometimes my head is like clouded when I think of um, his wife getting arrested for the college. Uh, they got their
Oh, the
daughter.
scandal.
Yeah, yeah. And what was his
Oh,
wife's
that's
name?
right.
Felicity Hoffman or whatever.
This is oh yeah, it's Felicity.
And she got arrested for it and had to serve some jail time. But I'm like, he probably had something to do with this too. Like, there's no way he didn't know what was going on. So, like, I'm always clouded with that ever since that happened. But I did really like the guy that Joan Allen remarried, Leo, like his character and how he interacted with Jack, I thought was like really great and subtle and just like that juxtaposition to William H. Macy's character as Brie Larson's actual dad, not being able to accept Jack, knowing where he came from, but her stepfather ostensibly like didn't even need to have like a conversation or anything. He just was like, "Yeah, I'm just here. Like, I just want to be stable." And as a dog lover, like when he came with his dog and like seeing them in it, like all of that just was like very like I don't know, just felt very powerful and authentic to me. And so, yeah, I think this was for the subject matter of this film. This was way. Um, I'm hesitant to use the word enjoyable, but I'm lacking a better word right now. This is way more enjoyable of a watch than I thought it was going to be, given the subject matter that it had. Now, I feel like you could make an argument that maybe not detrimental, but that there could have been a deeper kind of I don't know, commentary on shit with this, but I think the narrative and the story it told about the power of a mother's love for her son, and then equally a mother's love for her daughter and a son's love for his mother, like and what that can aspire to, I think was pretty strong. Um, Almost to the point of schmaltzy, but not quite getting there for me. Like I think the fact, like the subject matter of it and getting exposure to that to some extent in the first half of the movie stopped it from getting too schmaltzy. Like if this had been a movie that within the first 5 minutes it portrayed their escape and what that was, and that was it. I think it could have been much more schmaltzy if it had been done that way. But the balance of like spending time with them in room and then post room, I think helped it feel heavy and weighty, but also like hopeful, which very easily could have been done differently for artistic reasons or storytelling purposes. But I'm glad the way it was. I'll kick it over to one of you guys.
Alex, take it away.
Yeah, Dustin, I think you nailed it. I really appreciated the restraints here, and I think it was a really smart decision to affix the POV so firmly to Jack. And those first scenes we get in Room really set the tone where we're seeing Room through Jack's perspective, and he's looking up at the skylight. He's like focusing really intently at all these like aspects and naming them. And there's just such a warmth and tenderness to his perspective and to his fondness for Room that I think is a really smart way to wrap your your arms around a subject that if you just read like a 2 sentence description of what's actually happening here, it makes your stomach churn. But seeing it through Jack's eyes almost makes it easy to kind of process like how horrific that is. Um, and I read some reviews that described those early scenes as being kind of clumsy or amateurish in the way that they were filmed. And I didn't necessarily agree with that. I thought they were kind of deliberately um, had this kind of hazy, gauzy sheen to them because we're seeing them through a 5-year-old's eyes, essentially. And we're seeing them kind of like filtered through that wonder and that like kind of sun dappled visual aesthetic that I think was really strong in those early scenes in Room. Um, I kept thinking back to Cormac McCarthy's The Road and then the movie adaptation of that. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that story, but it's, similar vibes of uh, a father and or a parent and a child being stuck in like impossibly harrowing situation, and the love that a parent has for their child and the humanity present there, um, being their way through kind of this hellish, nightmarish reality.
I just
Um,
want to interject and say that I saw The Road with my mom and stepdad for what I believe was my stepdad's birthday.
oh
Um,
no.
and I'm not
Light
sure.
fare, light fare on
I'm
that.
not sure like what the train of thought was, because that was definitely like, I think that came out in like 2011 or something. So like definitely like past the point of like excusing like ignorance in terms of what the subject matter was. But I also took my mom to see a comedy movie with Jenna Elfman, Ben Stiller, and Edward Norton in the 90s for Mother's Day. Oh, what was it? Oh God.
Saving Silverman.
No, not Saving Silverman. Edward Norton plays a priest, and Ben
Oh,
Stiller plays
Jennifer,
a
Keeping the Faith. Keeping the
keeping the
Faith.
faith. Yep, we took my mom
Very
to
good movie.
yeah, we took my mom to see that for Mother's Day in like '98 when I was 10, and there's definitely like some light sex scenes in there, and that was awkward too. So we don't have, my stepdad and I don't have the best track record for picking family friendly fare to see. But anyways, I digress. Alex, back to you.
That's fantastic. Um, yeah, and I just appreciated the restraint, again, to use the same word, in not actually showing the more horrific shit that old Nick does. And we're kind of with Jack in the closet while that's happening. I think that is really integral to not kind of losing audience buy-in in the story at that point. I think it would have been really easy to tune out or shut this off if we had seen too much of, those interactions. Um, you talked, Dustin, about how good Jacob Tremblay is as Jack. Um, I won't say I've been lukewarm on Brie Larson, but I feel like I've never really gotten to see her kind of express a dynamic performance that has a wide range. Maybe I'm just thinking of some of her stuff. Like, I think she's pretty flat in Captain Marvel, and she can kind of have an aloof persona when she's portraying characters. But here, she is just a fucking powerhouse, and there's so much range that she brings to Ma, and we see the full gamut of human emotions. I think in these 2 hours that we get with her, where we see like fear and desperation, where she's realizing that, oh shit, old Nick lost his job. Like he could kill us now because he can't, financially support our material needs. Like that fear was conveyed really well, the desperation to escape, but also like the the drive to keep things light in the beginning as she's parenting Jack and kind of, shields him from everything happening in Room, to when she ultimately broadens his perspective and um, brings his awareness more open by saying, no, the things you see on TV, like there's elements of reality. I just think she gives a really dynamic, layered performance here that I appreciated. Um, like you, Dustin, I also liked how we got to spend the first half of the movie in room, but then it really opens up when we get to see kind of Ma and Jack's recovery in the second half after they escape. I think if I did have one beef with this movie, it would be with how the escape scene was kind of staged and executed, where it felt a little bit implausible to me that um, old Nick like would just kind of flee after after Jack kind of rolls out of the truck bed. Um, but I'm willing to give that a pass because the writing I thought was really strong in giving enough justification for why Ma would put him in that situation and why she would feel that desperation to have him escape. Um, yeah, I think the cinematography does a really good job in the second half of making you still feel like you're in enclosed spaces, even though Ma and Jack's world is totally opened up at that point. Um, there's still a sense of confinement that you get in some of the indoor scenes, and I like how for Jack that's comforting, and for Ma that's kind of restrictive. Um, but yeah, I want to hear your overall thoughts, Kyle. And there's a lot that we can kind of unpack on the scene by scene level.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try to take just touch on some different points than you guys saying because I definitely did enjoy this movie. It surprised me in a lot of ways, which is usually happens when you don't know exactly what a movie's about. But yeah, like those first scenes and the first half before they get out. I was kind of surprised and impressed by. It's interesting that you read some critiques of how that the first half was filmed, and they said it was kind of amateurish because I kept thinking to myself while I was watching that it's really amazing, and not only just how it's filmed, but what takes place and how they portray Old Nick and the relationship between him and Brie Larson, him and Ma, and Jack in general, and that whole space, and how he operates in that space, and what they come to expect, and just the mechanics of their life. Um, and movies that have abductions in them or the after effects of abductions. I guess I haven't really seen too many other ones that have just the after effects, but the idea that we never got a flashback of her being abducted and we never really delved into that all that deeply, and you enter this world in a place where the fact that they're there and that she's been there for 7 years at this point, and that Jack has been there for 5, obviously his whole life. It was kind of amazing how that was handled, like the matter of factness of their life was kind of shocking when you consider how that life was created, and you're just so used to the abduction itself being the star of the show, and that being the most charged moment. I think about I can't remember. Did we watch Prisoners for this podcast, or was that maybe one we watched before? Anyway, Prisoners with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, where the two little girls are kidnapped. Um, that's a great example of like the moment that is so pulsating with drama and emotion is the moment where of the initial loss. And it was just amazing to see a completely different take on that type of event being so far gone. And like, yeah, Jack does go into the wardrobe and knows that these things are happening, but it's kind of like very compartmentalized. And the conversations that Brie Larson has uh with Nick about like needing food and vitamins so that they can be alive in a way that isn't like bad for them, right? Like you can't just feed us this, and like just the level of that was kind of shocking, and I think very deftly done. And I'm sure this is a book, right? This was a book before it was a movie, I want to say. um and so I think that's it was just so deftly handled, and in a way and in a subject matter that I've just never seen done like that.
Yeah.
And so that was
To
just
interject real quick, Kyle, like
yeah.
one example of that deafness is when Brie Larson pulls out the tooth is like such a smart way of articulating the horror of the situation, but she plays it so matter of fact because she has to for Jack, and then it becomes this like wonderful affirming token of her love for him while still speaking to the abject horror of their situation. Just very, very shrewd.
Yeah, it really is. And I do agree with you a little bit about the escape scene. And it was kind of it's one of those moments in a movie where you're like, I don't know if this is happening too fast cinematically, or if this is just how this would have happened. And I'm so alien to this perspective because I'm a free person living in the world. When she kind of makes the turn of like, you know what? My son is old enough to start hearing some of these things in a way that is new and different, and I'm not going to protect him, and I can use him to save us both. Um, that and then kind of how it all went down. I guess I did believe Nick just bailing immediately because I feel like there's I mean, in a lot of ways, right? Like you normalize having a prisoner for 7 years. And so when that all falls apart, like your instinct probably is to just run away and think that you can get away with it because you kind of been getting gotten away with it for 7 years. But yeah, and I did appreciate the realness of William H. Macy's character not being able to deal with Jack's existence and it taking this person that was not, Brie Larson's father to kind of be able to have that space. But yeah, it really was on every. I mean, and just the realness of some of those breakdowns where her mom is not just gonna kind of roll over and just say, "Oh yeah, you've been through trauma. It's all like I'm so sorry." She's like, "No," like fighting back and the suicide attempt and all the very mundane details of like, no, you have to wear a mask and you have to wear sunglasses and your body is not developed in this way. It's just it was all very in a it was the right amount of emotion while maintaining hope, which I think is really an impressive to maintain hope throughout almost the whole movie is kind of incredible to accomplish with the subject matter. Um, all the acting was wonderful. I like there just wasn't I just didn't think there was a failed moment in any of it. When it came to any of that, the writing was good, the pacing was good. Um, and it was tough, and it was tough in the right ways. And yeah, Jack's character is amazing, and I do think that by the time the final scene was a scene that I didn't necessarily expect to happen, but the needing of closure from that, um, Jack needing that, and how that scene echoed the beginning scene where he's saying good morning to all of the things in room, and how like we're even adopting the language that Jack had to speak about this place. I think that Jack had this kind of special language about it. Really, when this movie came out, I think I was more interested in it epistemologically with regard to a kid growing up in such a small space with no interaction and all those things, and obviously, now that I'm a parent and I picked a whole parenting week, that was just, yeah, like, and her being willing to go back there and go through that process, and that really being like, that was just a really nice coda, that
I
didn't
agree.
cheap.
And I love how Brie Larson kind of deflates that coda just a little bit because Jack's having this like, profound moments of like mirroring the beginning where he's saying goodbye and he's, processing it. And Ma's just kind of like, Jack, can we go? Like, I don't want to spend more time here. And that was just such a realistic reaction. And I liked how underplayed it was for like all of the emotion that Jack's reaction is bringing to it. It was a nice balance.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it was like you said on kind of the group chat, Alex, like the soft touch of this movie with the incredible weight of what's happening. And I mean, like, we're talking about a movie having a soft touch that involves a 7-year kidnapping and a bunch of rape and a child being born out of that and a suicide attempt and an inability to connect with like your people. I mean, just the heaviness is insane of what's actually
Mm.
happening. So to be able to keep people there is just, yeah, that's where it's like amateurish. It was is kind of a hilarious thing to level at this movie because it felt very very well made, well thought out, and like everything they decided to show, which obviously there was more that was cut, was it's well spun together. I will say this as kind of like a, unless you guys have more you want to say in it, I will say this as kind of like a segue to another one. I Maybe it's because the characters were so good and the relationships on screen were so good in Room, but unlike Panic Room, which we can go into next, I really felt like an intimate connection to the space in Panic Room, and I was kind of shocked when they got out of the room in Room that I kind of felt like, wow, they really didn't, or I didn't feel like the claustrophobic nature
Yeah,
of that room, which is
I think that was
shocking.
intentional. I think that was due to the
Yeah.
craftsmanship of the cinematography because you're seeing
yes.
Yes.
these little like shots almost in abstraction, and it's setting up that reveal at the end where you come back to Rum and you're kind of like, holy shit, it was that entire space. And Jack even has that reaction where he's like, did it get smaller? Like, what's going on here?
Hmm.
And I think it's because you're seeing that cinematic POV as Jack would see it, where there's almost these little like abstracted glimpses of, you know, him looking at the radiator or him looking at the TV, him looking up at the skylight. You're not getting a sense for how all the pieces fit together. And I think that's intentional because if you did, you would kind of be crushed by the weight of how bleak that is to be in a shed like that for 7 years. So I think, you know, keeping it fractured, diffuse, where you're only seeing these little like snapshots of parts of Room, um, keeps that reality from being too crushing.
Well, and I think part of it too is the fact that whether we're seeing so much. I think the whole movie is really through maybe not the exact eyes of Jack, but the lens of Jack, and so even old Nick, who we meet a couple times, but we never true. I mean, remember, since he's been alive, like Jack's been sleeping in that closet in the room every night. Like he's been there when all the shit that old Nick has done to Ma has happened. But we don't like I think maybe that speaks to why Alex, your critique about like his escape and old Nick, you know, doesn't really put up a fuss to keep Jack there. Like that's kind of like how Jack remembers it, how Jack experienced it, because it was kind of, he was there and he tried to grab him and he dragged him away, but Jack ran off and then he just kind of disappeared. And like there's no, even when we get back to Ma's parents' house and she's there, like even when she has she attempts suicide, like we're never getting it from like the lens of like what she's going through and what's going through her mind. We see it externally, and I mean, I think it would be arguably, in my opinion, kind of insufferable if the whole movie was truly from Jack's perspective, right? Like, and we were fully limited to only how he's comprehending things. And I don't honestly know how you would make that movie without it being really boring in a way. But we're almost like on the other side of the partition with him, right? And because we're adults, we can surmise and connect the dots and fill in the blanks, but we're still not getting that actual raw information about what happened and things like that. And even the exposure of the room and the experience of that room, it's like we're almost in that room with them, but we don't have eyes ourselves. We're hearing Jack's descriptions of things and Jack pointing things out. Like if you were only hearing audio of him talking about his life and experience in Room, it would seem a lot bigger than it is based on all the ways that Ma has kind of constructed that reality for him and things like that. And so I think that's kind of how I took it, as why that first half of the movie doesn't the dark undertones are all there, but the visual, like literal visual, but like metaphorical visual as well, of like the true darkness and her reality, we're just left to fill in the blank because anything we can imagine is gonna be, nowhere near as bad as what she actually went through, kind of a thing. But also, it's, the whole story being told isn't so much about what happened to her that got her there, um, and brought Jack to this world. It's really like leading up to and when she makes a decision that Jack needs to leave room, and what machinations she puts in forward there. Like the whole point of the story that we see, like that's the reason we don't see Jack as a baby. Like we see him right when he's having that birthday, and then pretty shortly thereafter, that sequence of events happens that puts in motion her decision to roll him up in that carpet, and that triggers the rest of the movies. So it's really about like when Jack truly became born to the world itself and everything around that lens. That's my take, at least.
Yeah,
Nice. No, I think it's really nicely put.
yeah, no, I agree.
I think that's a good trend. I mean, what you were saying about Panic Room and feeling, how did you describe the house in Panic Room?
Like really, I don't know. I feel like intimately connected to the space.
Yes, yes.
Um,
Hmm.
It feels like
yeah,
it's its own character. Like
yeah,
It
like
is.
that's something that I feel like when I think back to originally seeing that movie in the theater, like it just felt so. It didn't feel. I don't know about you guys, but like Panic Room doesn't feel claustrophobic to me, but it
no,
just feels very like, ironically, like real and lived in, even though they're literally staying in the house for the first time that night of the movie, which I kind of feel like I forgot, like going in. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, like it really is their first night here. Um, but yeah, God, the atmosphere in that movie is just so good. The rain, the storm, like
I feel
yeah.
like that movie does
Every shot.
such a good job of capturing that feeling when you're moving into a new place. That first night, like alien trepidation of I'm not familiar with the space. I don't really feel like I belong here. And the way Fincher just captures that through the visuals and through like the framing is such a good mood setter, vibe setter for like what unfolds over the next hour and a half, 2 hours.
mhm.
Yeah, like I thought a lot about as I like looked up other Fincher movies as this was going down and trying to track my timeline. Like Seven is a very good movie, and I very much enjoy it. But like this movie really feels like where we get so much more of what we will eventually come to know as
Yes,
kind of the Fincher. Yeah,
absolutely.
right.
A
Like the
hundred,
Fincher
a hundred,
lens.
100% agree. Seven and Fight Club, I feel like, and I mean, even going back to like Aliens 3, which I have a soft spot for, um, a hit, because those are his only three in the 90s, right? Because Fight Club was like 99, seven, or no, the game. That's another blind spot. I still haven't seen
Oh,
the
I haven't
game
seen the game.
with
Yeah.
Michael Douglas, but I feel like I would guess the game fits in with those other three, where you can see a lot of a lot of Fincherisms, and you can definitely like watch all those together and be like, yeah, this is the same guy. I can totally feel that vibe. But I feel like Panic Room, really, like when like for me, when I think of The Social Network, when I think of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, even what's this latest one with Michael Fassbender? What's that one called?
Oh, like Hitman or something.
Yeah, it's not Hitman,
Yeah, it's not, but it's
but
about a hitman. It's
yeah,
killer or
The
something. Yeah,
Killer. The
the
yeah.
Killer.
killer.
Even that, like, I feel like there's just this like, I don't even know, like it's this like dark, like heavy, like velvety weight that I feel like is kind of like cast over everything. And this is the first movie that I feel like in his chronology that I feel that like just that it's like this black pool that you're going through, and it's like this cool, like the coolest, smoothest, velvetiest kind of thing, where it just feels like there's this dripping, oozing mood for me that just connects everything, and I just kind of see it enveloping all of his movies from here on. In terms of like the atmosphere and the vibe, and I even saw it a little bit in his what was the Netflix series that he did about the FBI serial killer division in the 70s or 80s. Like that was another one that you could, like, at least the early episodes that he directed, you could still feel the same kind of brooding in it. in that I was so like, it's probably been a decade since I've watched Panic Room, and I was so pleased to know that like I still loved it as much as I did the first time I saw it.
Yeah. Alex, this was your first time watching Panic Room though. So like how was your viewing?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I do have to say the caveat that I feel like I would have maybe had a higher first impression of Panic Room if it had been an earlier Fincher for me. I think because so many of his films are like such titanic monuments in my own like just filmography. Like I adore Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Um, Zodiac is one of my favorite thrillers ever. I think that is like a rare perfect movie. And he has several perfect movies. Whereas this felt a little bit almost slighter in comparison, where it's like it's a really well executed genre movie. Um, but there were parts that felt a little bit sloppy to me. Um, and some of that is a good thing. I think there's an experimental playfulness here with how Fincher uses the camera that like had me just fucking grinning ear to ear. When you said the word velvety Dustin, I immediately thought of that like camera move we get in the first 15 minutes where we're seeing the 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 intruders like kind of casing the joint from the front, and we get the camera like whooshing through the coffee pot and then going into like
Hmm.
the drain tile. Like that's just good shit, and it felt again experimental and playful in a way where I think later Fincher feels more refined and less kind of loose. um, so I thought that was a really strong aspect of it. um, I think one thing I struggled with was, to me, it felt like there was kind of a lack of tension for much of this movie, um, where I think the fact that Forrest Whitaker's Burnham establishes so clearly on that he is so against like what's happening here. He doesn't want to like kill these people. He doesn't want to harm them. You quickly get the sense that Jared Letos Jr. is in over his head even before you get the reveal that he's a nepo baby and he is kind of trying to steal his family inheritance. Um, but I think a big part of it is that Dwight Yoakam's Raoul doesn't get that hint of menace until too late in the story for me. I think you get clues that he is the wild card, that he's, wasn't part of his job originally, but it almost felt like a puzzle to be solved in for the first 45 minutes to an hour, where it was like, okay, you've got Burnham, Raoul, and Junior trying to get into the room. How do they get these people to leave? And the way that it all plays out is dramatically compelling, but I just found myself wishing there was more tension and more stakes. And we do get those stakes like majorly. I think once Junior gets offed, and we really see like, oh shit, like Raul is like a serious threat. He is insane and a sociopathic killer. Um, then those stakes elevated for me, but I think that was a little bit too late in the story for me to feel the like, you know, chest pounding in my heart vibes that I feel like the movie wanted me to feel. Um,
I
but yeah,
yeah, I
I
can
really enjoyed this, but I think that was probably my biggest stumbling block.
I I can kind of see what you're saying, but I feel like I kind of got some of what I needed for like Forrest Whitaker's like there was enough for me with Burnham where he like where you get the hint that like, oh, like maybe he not isn't a softie or anything, but like maybe isn't, looking to like murder anyone. But then he like every step of the way I feel like he takes like one step forward and then like one and a half back. Like one step forward towards being more like menacing and evil, and then or maybe not a one and a half back, but like maybe one step back or maybe a quarter step. Like I think about when they like put the natural gas into the room, like into the HVAC system, like that scene. The fact, I mean, that to me underscores the whole thing that like, yeah, if he wanted to, like he could fucking figure this out on his own kind of a thing. Like he's the brains of this whole experience kind of a thing. And the fact that he like had the smarts to like think of like, oh, let's put the fucking gas into the vent and whatnot. But then you've got like, the fact that he was thinking that, but then also that at that time Raul is putting the too much gas in there or whatever, and like that whole dynamic between the three of them of like don't put too much, and if you do put too much you're going to knock them out, and then how are we going to get in the room, like that. I mean, that's probably the strongest moment where I feel like that kind of dynamic changes a little bit. And then even like I do really like the part when they finally open the door, when they, pull a fast one on Jodie Foster so that she thinks that they knocked her ex-husband unconscious, and that Burnham beat up Raul and dragged him out of the room, but Raul switched wardrobe or whatever. That whole scene, I think, is like, I remember the first time I saw it, it kind of threw me for a loop because I what threw me for a loop with it was the fact that once I realized what was happening, I'm like, oh shit, like is Burnham like truly on the dark side here? Like it's one thing for him to like not want to go along with it willingly, but like this was a pretty elaborate plan that he could have very easily like somehow signaled to her was BS. And the fact that he like didn't and fully went on to it, it's like, okay, maybe he is like fully on the dark side of this kind of a thing. And then I always remember just the suspense of like the tables kind of being turned where Jodie Foster's outside of the panic room and they're in the panic room now. And the fucking great scene when Raul's fingers get cut off in the door and he's like just losing his
That
shit.
was
The
so
sound
good.
he makes, the sound he makes when that happens is incredible.
Well, and just to see him like become so disabled and so like you could easily just end him right then and there. But the fact that afterwards he still becomes like this like lethal imminent threat to Jodie Foster up until the very very end is really
Absolutely.
affecting, like in a testament to the performance that Yoakum does. um but I just remember like I don't want to say I was disappointed, but I like 20 some years later, not surprising, like in my head I had thought this was like when Jodie Foster's out of the room and I remember her like taking the hammer or whatever to the cameras so they can't see what she's doing. In my head I thought that was like much more of like a heavily calculated like, oh, she kind of is like funneling them by like closing certain doors and shit like that, and then she's hiding in the elevator. But in my head it was much more elaborate than it really was on screen. Like, and obviously if it was any more elaborate than it was on screen, it probably would have been boring and not interesting to see her like set up all these like traps and whatnot that I had written in my head canon for it. But yeah, like that whole part I think is just crazy. And then I do remember the other thing that always like the other two things from a logical perspective that like always drove me fucking nuts with this movie were, one, like why install security cameras and not put microphones with them? Like I'm like, what the fuck are you like? Why would you not do that? like, or yeah. And then the end part when after Forrest Whitaker shoots him and runs back into like the terrace or
Courtyard.
whatever, yeah, the
Yeah.
courtyard, and then he's like climbing the fence and he like puts the bearer bonds in his jacket. Like, I don't know, like that whole like I just feel like if he had tried a little harder, he could have made it out. And I like always wanted him to get away. And I'm like, oh, dude, like if you could have just like, I don't know, it's like just moved up your timetable by like 30 seconds, you probably could have gotten out of here, because I don't buy that the cops would have been able to surround the building that fast and efficiently or anything, based on these two cops going back to the precinct and being like, yeah, something's a little fishy here. And they send out the whole fucking SWAT team. Like, what's going on? Like, I don't, but that's besides the point. But I still love this movie. Like, And I can't. The other thing I'll say is I can't believe I didn't list Zodiac. That's the other one with Fincher that just all of those like meld together and like they're like one. They should be one big movie with like all these different beats that just feel the same kind of mood and dread. Social Networks may be the one odd one out because there's like not murder involved in it or anything like that. But when I think of like Girl with Dragon Tattoo, this movie, Zodiac, and all those, yeah, it just all kind of fits together for me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. Like when you mentioned Fight Club, I was like, oh yeah, that was Fincher. But I always think of that as like an Ed Norton, Brad Pitt thing, especially around the time of like American History X and all
Yeah.
those things. Like Fight Club, again, I just wasn't into directors.
Well, and yeah, and I think when you think back to like Seven and you think back to Fight Club, like I think, and given those were before our, when we were kids, but like I people weren't talking about Seven because it was a David Fincher movie. They were talking about Seven because it was Brad Pitt when Brad Pitt was like just becoming hot and because it was fucking insane. In
Yeah,
Fight
Yeah,
Club, it was because it was Brad Pitt and Edward Norton to a slightly lesser extent. That again wasn't Fincher. That was like the selling point. And I think this movie, not that it was fully him, but maybe was like the first movie after Seven, after Fight Club, where people were like, "Well, this is David Fincher guy. Like, we better." I'm sure that brought people to the theaters to some
yeah.
extent, more so than those other movies. His name being attached to it, and then certainly once you get to Zodiac and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Social Network, then it's like, oh, I'm going to go see this new David Fincher movie because he's the guy
right.
who directed all this other great shit.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. That yeah, the way that you're spelling that out. Yeah, certainly by the time Girl with the Dragon Tattoo came out, it was like David Fincher is redoing this already amazing
Yep,
movie. We
yep.
have to see it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, obviously Daniel Craig, like big names in those, but like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
even they were brought. Well, I'm sure someone like Jodie Foster partially came to the material because he was involved in it, but like by then his name was a selling point, and I think this might have been the first movie, if I had to wager a guess, was the first one where his name was like involved in the marketing materials to some degree of prominence, right? Because the only other
yeah,
person you really have that's pulling weight in terms of celebrity status for this at the time is probably Jodie Foster. Like
yeah.
Forrest Whitaker was established, but he wasn't huge or not huge, as big as he would be now or 10 years ago. Um,
Jared Leto would have been like probably just Fight Club, right? Like that's where we would have known Jared
yeah,
Leto from.
I forgot that he was in that too.
Yeah,
And
his
he
face gets
wasn't
fucked
even
up in that
like
one
a,
too.
yeah, and he wasn't even like a
He's a
selling
side
point.
character in that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
I mean, maybe there was some Yokomites that were coming here. Uh, they were probably a little disappointed in his character arc, for that matter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think you bring up a
but
good point, Dustin, just like charting that progression for Fincher. We don't get a lot of auteurs in Hollywood who are both, I feel like, commercial and critical, like darlings, the way that Fincher is.
Hmm.
You brought up Prisoners earlier, Kyle, and I feel like Denis Villeneuve is another example of someone who, like, straddles both worlds of being an auteur with like a distinct filmmaking vision and language, but also makes like these big blockbusters that people come out in droves to see. And
Yeah.
yeah, it has been cool to see, you know, I think Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I remember that trailer blew people's fucking minds. And then like it
Hmm.
had a really great stinger, like, by David Fincher listing his other credits. And, you know, at that point he was fully established as like his own, voice in American film.
yeah. Oh, David Fincher, I do enjoy you. Um, Although I did not enjoy that most recent one that Fassbender was in, but that's neither here nor there. Um, I love this movie. I love this movie on like I don't know, every level. Like I love how much it does with something that's so simple. Like it's just one of those, like it's so simple. And I think that the casting choices, as we've kind of brought up, were just perfect. You know what I mean? Like I think this movie could kind of really lose its way with Jodie Foster cast as somebody else. because Jodie Foster has this ability to kind of be understated, but like she's there, she's powerful, she's executing, like, it's a great performance, but it's never scene stealing, I guess is the way to describe it. And scene stealing in that pejorative way, not in the good way. Um, and and Forrest Whitaker, all the characters, but the way that the camera operates in the space is just so amazing. Like the scene where she goes to get the cell phone and they're all yelling downstairs and they're alerted to what's going on up there with the lamp breaking, like incredible. So that's I'm shocked that you didn't feel the tension, Alex, because I feel like there's and even knowing what was happening, I feel like there's these moments of tension. And I think the blood sugar with Kristen Stewart is a real that's a real overarching tension builder for me. The chess game that they're playing in and out of the panic room, when her husband shows up, when the cops show up, her ex-husband shows up, when the cops show up, like I guess I'm feeling the tension a lot during this movie, almost throughout the whole thing. I mean, I'm feeling the tension in the beginning when they're walking through, and you have the bizarre, stuffy New York realtor people, and her, and I'm feeling the tension there of her not even necessarily knowing what she's doing in the space, and Kristen Stewart's character running around, doing young people stuff. But Raul, I guess I felt that I love Raul's character arc in this so much, and what happens what happens to him, but visually what you get, and how you start off with this guy who introduces a gun, so it's obviously going to get used, introduces a gun, has the ski mask, um, is quiet, and is one of the first people to kind of like once they have that moment of everyone knows everyone's there type of thing, he has that very aggressive line towards like, where are you guys going to go kind of thing, and to me that kind of betrays that sociopathic killer, I'm happy to be here to fuck shit up type of mentality. But then how he goes from that in the beginning to this like disheveled, grossly balding guy, and like the way that they do his hair is in that way that's just like, you know what I mean? Like that's just the
That
visual
is
arc
really
of
good.
Raul. It's from the beginning of like there's just this like, I don't know what he looks like under there. Like he could just be like real suave and like a true killer. And then by the end of it, he's just the most pathetic individual on screen. And it's so wonderful. Um, but yeah, when God, man, when they there's a lot of decisions made by characters that I feel like are justified with how stupid criminals are, and the types of things you make when you're the types of decisions you make when you're desperate, and just I don't know, Jared Leto's kind of character being like real, I don't know, braggadocious in the beginning, but then very quick to bail, and then how just he's so without even a second thought clacked and killed, and how that ramps up everything so immediately. I mean, God, I just and even like the simple stuff like we've mentioned, how they're in the room and then that switches and there's all these like power dynamics that are going on, and I really like the scene where the cops show up, and my only counterpoint to you being like, would the cops really do that, is like, well, this is the richest part of New York, so I feel like
Yeah.
if there's any place where the cops are going to swarm and actually be coordinated and on top of shit, it's where all the richest people live. um but yeah, like and how much, like how the little like the sound is used, because you're in this house that doesn't have anything in it yet, and so
Mhm.
it's echoey, and that I think it kind of starts when they have the gas going into the room and she figures out how to get a lighter, and she's trying to click it on and they're hearing it and they're like,
So such a great
what
scene.
is that?
With Jared Leto, and you know what's gonna happen, and the
Oh
fact that
yeah.
like Forrest Whitaker's like backing up and Dwight Yoakam's
Hmm.
like backing up, and you're just like, yeah, Jared, just put your face towards it, man.
Yep. And
It's like
I love that
so
the
great because
callback.
he Oh, it's so
Yeah.
good.
To go back to that scene when Forrest Whitaker puts his face on the wall, and Charlotte's like, "Be careful with that. Don't just be careful." Um, that is just so great. Oh man,
Yeah.
I can't say enough good things about this movie because it's just so well. There's not like a wasted moment or a wasted shot or like any of it is just it's just wonderful, and I feel like I could just be in that house right now and just know my way around entirely. And yeah, just those simplicit those simple things and how they kind of express it in the most simple way with signage. Like, get out of the house, like, well, we will, but what we want is in that room. You've kind of screwed yourself there.
Yeah.
Uh, and how cooler heads can't prevail because the characters involved. But really, for me, it's all about that. Like that Raoul arc is just so amazing, and how he does continue to stay locked in, and like he recognizes Kristen Stewart watching the cameras, seeing her mom do stuff, and oh
Yeah.
man, it's like great. And he is, Raul is, and I think I mentioned this in a couple other things I've talked about, but he's like that lightning bolt, right? Like Jared Leto wants the money, but he's not really willing to work that hard for it. So he bails. He gets wishy washy really quickly. Obviously, Forrest Whitaker was hoping to be in and out and not have this be a problem, and he's wrestling with all these things. Jodie Foster's trying to like figure out how to manage all the mothering and parenting, but then trying to make sure that I don't know, she doesn't get hurt and get them out of the house and whatever. There's just a lot of dynamic characters other than Raul, who is just right through the whole thing, which obviously moves things along relatively quickly a lot of the time. Um, yeah, it's amazing how much is done with so little, and so it's really nice to return to this movie and watch it. But yeah, I mean, I also just felt like, as I intended with these three movies, to talk about like how space was portrayed. This to me was the one where the space was a character in a way that the other ones it just didn't have. I mean, it was present in the other ones, but this one was like so much different, from the elevators to like, oh man. And even that scene where like she pulls the phone wire out and they're all watching it, and then it
Yeah.
just like, and it's just it's so great that like you said, Dustin, like it hits on that, or maybe you said it, Alex, that moving in feeling where nothing is there, everything's in boxes. And I felt like they also got a fair amount of, it was amazing how connected I felt to a story that I really don't get any part of, which is this divorce and him cheating on or like having an affair with a younger woman. And she's just buying this giant fucking house in New York just as kind of like a little bit of revenge on a cheating, very, very, very rich husband. Just that intimate moment where like she pours that extra Coke. She's like, "Hey, let's not go down that pathway or whatever," but then pours more Coke onto Kristen Stewart's glass after she had previously told her to stop. Like, and that ending scene where they're looking at more houses, and I just felt like I got a lot out of this relationship between mother and daughter, and then also the overarching family dynamic without almost ever talking about it, which I think is impressive to be able, in terms of writing. I feel like it's impressive to be and acting, but like to get that much for me, feeling like I knew a lot about these characters' backgrounds without, like, it was a lot of show don't tell, that I felt really got you there, which
Mm.
is impressive. Which is I mean, like, and hey, there's a lot of that with the criminals as well,
Right.
but yeah, and that last scene in the courtyard where he doesn't make it out. It's a little bit corny because it's slightly heavy-handed, but how all, like, just the visual scene, the visual like the visual, not a scene, but the visual of all those bonds
Yeah.
swirling in that
Fluttering in
Yeah.
the
courtyard,
wind is so
and
good.
just like yeah, when crazy amounts of money gets involved, chaos just ensues.
Yeah.
And I love that little
Well said.
bit at the end. And yeah, I mean, just an incredible watch. I'm glad we could use this podcast to get Alex to watch this movie, and I think it was wonderful. It's just an incredibly enjoyable watch. And I'm happy it's now part of my Apple library.
That was a great breakdown, and I'm excited to revisit this at some point. I feel like keeping those some of those things in mind about Raoul's arc, about just some of the inversions there. Um, and this is a minor quibble, but I'm like almost interrogating my own reaction to some things as they were happening. But you mentioned the scene where Jodie Foster's Meg is getting the cell phones from under the mattress, and when it's cross-cutting between her retrieval and them in the stairwell having their argument and their realization. For me, that was a moment where the pieces didn't quite fit together, where it almost felt like it was happening too slowly for me to feel that tension. And I know some of that is a deliberate stylistic choice, like the slow motion is a deliberate stylistic choice to get you to like really feel that building of tension. But in terms of like filmmaking craft, I just felt like there was maybe one too many cuts back and forth between the two locations. Where I think if that time frame had been shortened just a little bit, for me as a viewer, I would have been holding my breath rather than being like, okay, this is really feeling prolonged and drawn out, which is kind of my reaction to it as it was happening. Um, but again, these are minor quibbles for like what the movie does do well. And talking about space and like how intimately you feel like you get to know that apartment and that panic room. One thing I loved is that final shot that we get when they're on the park bench in Central Park, looking at new listings, is just how absolutely lush and color filled and gorgeous that looked. Like I feel like Central Park in autumn has, you know, at least in my memory, like rarely looked that good in a film. And I think it's such a good contrast to kind of like the muted colors of that apartment that we spend 2 hours in, to be like reminded of like, outside of this harrowing experience, there's like this lush world. They're back in it. They survived. Just a great way to use like the visual language to communicate like, that there is light back in their world now that they've escaped from this situation.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I feel like that's a good point. Like they're just open, right? There's no walls around them. And he's doing that camera effect where you zoom in but bring the camera back physically, so it kind of like warps the space to give it even more texture, which is a camera effect that I absolutely love when used properly. Yeah, no, that's a very good point, Alex. Well, let's move on to Carnage. You guys wanna move on to Carnage?
Let's
That
do
sounds
it.
good.
Yeah, this is a movie that when I watched, I had no idea that it was a Roman Polanski. It just wasn't on my radar. This is a theme that I'm noticing in a lot of my movie watching, that I'm returning to some of these old movies. It's like, yeah, I loved it, and yeah, I was just shocked to find out that it was a Roman Polanski. I was watching this for the actors. I was watching this for Christoph Waltz and John C. Riley, frankly, and Kate Winslet and Jodie Foster were pleasant surprises. But yeah, I when it first, I mean, if you guys don't mind me ripping into it,
Yeah.
when when I first started watching the movie, I was kind of like, huh. I mean, it's a movie based on a play, right? So that does have a certain aspect, and it's definitely like a black box play, where it's a very one stage, like small space that people are probably sitting all around you, or at least on three sides of you, and it kind of starts with like a level of wooden awkwardness that I almost tripped myself up when I was watching it. Like I was like, "Oh, was this actually well executed in the way that I remember, or is it really this kind of like stilted almost, or like just real?" I don't know. It just felt, but to me, as I kept watching and as the movie goes where it goes, you're like, "Oh no, that's just the awkwardness of these two units of parents trying to get together and have this social conversation when one of the kids has been absolutely annihilated by a stick by the other one." And the fall, like this movie is really just a movie about lines, right? Like to me, it's not shot in any way that's like incredible. Like that's not, and I'm not looking at camera movements here. I'm not looking at I'm not looking at the way the light works. I'm not looking at any of that. It's about actors acting in a small space, and the lines that they deliver to each other about their children are just some of them are so good. Like I'll just and obviously alcohol gets involved, and so the lines start to ramp up massively. But where I really think this movie takes a turn and gets into itself is when Christoph Waltz is like, "Our son is a maniac." And then doubles down on it again. It's like, no, he's a maniac. And the four types of kind of characters here, with like the very high powered white collar guy with a similar like a similar wife in that way, who's focused on all sorts of physical appearance stuff, and then the try hard of Jodie Foster's character, who's uptight about so many things, and Jodie Foster is so good at being really uptight, which I just loved watching her interact with Christoph Waltz over the course of this. But then how it turns into this weird like gender thing where the guys are together, the girls are together, um, and of course, you know, when someone throws up in the middle of your living room, obviously things get real squirrely really quickly. But I loved the only time I really felt the space in this movie is when they almost get out like three times.
Hmm.
And my wife kept screaming, like, she's like, "That wouldn't happen. This is ridiculous. There's no other way they would stay." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I've seen this play out. Like, I've seen people have the inability because of like parenthood to keep them out of things, and how they get shooed back in the third time because like some neighbor is opening their door and hearing them yell at one another. It's yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed it as, again, like a pretty simple thing, right? Like what starts this movie off, and what gets all these characters together is very simple, and then it's really, I mean, you can see that it's a play, right? Like it's very on the face of it, but I just thought it was well cast on every sense. Christoph Waltz absolutely crushed when John C. Reilly starts smoking cigars and drinking, and he's letting fly on their whole life, and how it goes from this very, oh, we're just trying to get together to be good parents and teach our kids how to operate. And by the end of it, it's like everyone is torn down to their absolute nub, is just fantastic. That's really what I have to say to start this off. But who wants to chime in?
Alex, you can go.
Yeah, so I liked this, but I was also frustrated by it. I totally get your wife's reaction, Kyle, where there's that like frustration of like, why would they keep coming back? Like, that's totally fucking ridiculous that they would stay, you know, for this long of a prolonged, like, painful interaction. But it works thematically because they're clearly like underscoring a lot of these things about ego and pride and how we see ourselves in our kids and the desire to win arguments and the desire to rationalize the perceptions that we construct around ourselves and all of these kind of like layers of artifice that are slowly uh, chipped away at over the course of the movie. I do think that some of my frustration with that is a consequence of this being an adaptation of a play. And I think you described like it being a black box play, Kyle, like nicely. And like there's an intimacy when you're seeing live theater where you're buying into the suspension of disbelief more than you are when you're viewing a film. And I think those scenes where we do go out in the hallway were so frustrating to me because they broke the artifice of like this is all happening in a single room, and it was like, no, we can clearly see like there is more beyond these four walls. We can see like the elevator that they should be taking. um, so I think there were just a lot of times when I was almost painfully aware of the artifice of all this and of the constructed nature of this kind of story. um, and some of that was just kind of, you know, my lens while watching. But when I did give myself into the performances, to the really witty and funny writing, um, like I think Jodie Foster yelling, you know, "Your kid's a fucking snitch" is one of the funniest things I've seen in a movie in a minute. Um, and I think she does Shrill so well. And even when she's playing strong characters, there's like a brittleness to her. And I think that brittleness is almost her defining characteristic here. She just like loses it at everything and has no, you know, no ability to kind of withstand these tete-a-tetes. Um, you talked about Christoph Waltz, his artifice being kind of torn down. Um, I think my favorite like arc in this was John C. Riley as Michael, where he goes from this kind of demure people pleasing, like, I'll just go with whatever my wife wants to do, kind of a husband, to over the course of the movie being like a total, you know, caveman alpha, like smoking cigars. I'm I'm a conservative who pretends he's a liberal. Like that was another great line.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think it
You
really
dress me up
plays
like a liberal?
plays to his strengths as an actor. I think, if nothing else, this is uh, an exceptionally well cast movie. And like you were saying, Kyle, one of the best things it does is, Polanski, he frames things well. The blocking is good, the staging is good, but he really just gets the hell out of the way and lets these four amazing actors just kind of bounce off each other. And I think for as frustrated as I did feel intermittently by this, and despite feeling the length of it, I think more than I wanted to, there is a lot to appreciate and enjoy here. Uh, Dustin, what was your vibe on Carnage?
I don't really have a ton to say beyond what both of you kind of said. I feel like my feelings of it kind of perfectly bridge those two perspectives. I mean, not that you guys disagreed or anything, but like um I thought I feel like if I didn't know, like the fact that I knew this was based on a play made me allowed me to enjoy it more because I did like the story. It's not really like the story being told doesn't feel particularly compelling to watch theatrically, were it not for the performances of the actors here. But even with that, I would still feel like I'm asking the question of like, why is this a movie? Kind of like it just, but then knowing that it was based off of a play feels like it was just kind of an excuse for like four extremely talented actors and a talented director to like get together and work together on a piece of media that is really good. I will say that I feel like at points the the dialogue almost felt too perfect. Not perfect. Perfect's not the right word. It felt too good to the
Mhm.
point of like having not had any sort of establishment of these characters in my perspective. It's like, oh, like, do I really know that they would be this on point with their wit and responses? Like, I don't have any sort of measure of history to to like go back on and be like, yeah, this guy's like on his shit, this lady's on her shit, kind of a thing. So sometimes I felt like I got taken out of it a little bit by dialogue that just felt too perfect for the moment and too almost like impeccably like witty and whatnot and sharp. um but then I got back into it after that, kind of a thing. So there wasn't like any one particular line or anything. Maybe once we got post throw up, once we got to like, I mean, I think maybe a little bit like towards the end, when really actually really close to the end, when like Kate Winslet was pretty well sloshed, and um she like once Jodie Foster threw her bag and knocked all the stuff on the floor, like that felt a little, I don't want to say forced, but just like a little like I'm like and then yeah, like I did feel like the breakdown, like I'm still not 100% clear as to like, wait, okay, so like are Jodie Foster and John C. Riley like truly just like fucking hate each other 100%, and were they like, because there was enough dialogue between the two of them, just the two of them, prior to that kind of breakdown to make me think that like, oh, if they really hated each other that much, maybe we would have gotten a little more hints to that. But that's, I mean, all of that's kind of moot and point, because for like it was 80 minutes, solid
Mhm.
compact film. I feel like if this was any longer, it would have been maybe a little less enjoyable for me.
Yes.
it was kind of the perfect length. And again, having that context of like, yeah, this was based on a play. Like, it's like, okay, I can totally see that. Like, that totally like rationalizes a lot of the other limitations that I would normally be asking about in a story like this.
Yeah, I I also really like just at the end. Um, I mean, I don't know. There's so many things with Kate Winslet like being the person who vomits, but then refusing to not like drink a whole bunch after that was was really it was how self destructive all these people are, especially once they get alcohol involved. But I don't know. I really liked the thing they did at the end, which I doubt exists in the play. Something tells me. Just making things up now. It's pure conjecture. Having a good time. I don't think in the play that there's any opening scene with a kid hitting another kid, and I don't think in the play there's an ending scene where the kids are like totally fine, just hanging out again,
Right.
like nothing happened, and these parents have gone through this hellacious afternoon that has led to all of them having various bodily fluids on them and being messed up and things getting broken and all sorts of things in their house getting screwed up. Like it's so great to see how this thing can completely annihilates the parents and the kids get over it almost instantaneously, seemingly, right? Like that's what we're given
Mm-hmm.
on it anyway. So I don't know. I appreciated that quite a bit, and I can see having been someone who has before I had a kid, like worked with a lot of kids of that age, right? Like 5 to 16. Um, to having had to mediate some of these types of things with two different sets of parents. Nothing that was this hilarious or well refined, but it was just enjoyable to watch that go down. And there was a lot of realness in some of the frustrations expressed by characters at a given stage with their partners about their marriages or with being a parent in general, or with the way that other people are characterizing your kid's behavior and using certain words, and just a complete clash of types of people who exist in the world that interact only because their kids interact, and how these people would have never sought each other out in any way, shape, or form other than that, and like what happens when those worlds collide because of that, because of the thing that brings them together. And I don't know, just what they all connect over at various times. Like they're like, "Oh, I had a gang. I beat this dude up. It was great," and how like everything is just I don't know. There's the kind of you want this to be a, oh yeah, we're above it. We're trying to be all sorts of better. We're trying to like, really just really have a civilization and a society, and then it all just goes to shit in so many different ways. And then there's just like waves of it happening over and over again. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't have too much more to say on this than that. I mean, I do think there's things you can criticize. I'm surprised you felt the length at all, Alex, because I do feel like it was pretty short, and kind of I don't know. Dustin also, if it was any longer, it would have been quite long. And I think by the time Kate Winslet's character screams, "Why are we still in this house?" It is like, yeah, we gotta wrap this thing up, baby. Um, is
Well,
yeah, wonderful.
correct me if I'm wrong. We don't see them leave the house, though, right? I don't
We
think we
don't.
do.
I think he just
We
cuts
don't.
when she like,
Cuts to
you know,
the hamster in the park, and so like the
Yes.
implication is very much that they could still be there.
right. Well, their kids are patching it up. They're just still like throwing tulips around and
Yeah,
throwing up and stuff.
Mm, yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful stuff. Well, I feel like we handled everything pretty well.
yeah. Well, let's do our rankings, and Kyle, let's kick it off with you. How would you rank these three?
This is a tough one. I feel like for rankings because I this is a tough one, man. I feel like I'm gonna go.
Well, maybe we do like so. Here's the thought. I mean, with our rankings, I feel like there's a couple episodes where we haven't done this, so like acting as though they're such an important bestowment of our podcast is probably inaccurate. But I feel like typically when we do these, it's based on the precipice of the whatever theme we chose. But we kind of
Right.
established that the theme that you picked originally of like a physical space being confined ultimately was not accurate for these three. But
Yeah.
I think it's a very valid and accurate theme that these are all movies about parenting,
Right.
very different ways. So maybe we do two rankings, because at least for me, I feel like I would rank these differently, just based like the three movies, just broadly. Like, how would I rank the three of these? And then how would I rank them as stories about parenting? Because I think that's very different for me.
Yeah, I think if I had to rank them just broadly, I'm going to go Panic Room at number one, Room number two, and Carnage number three. And I think if I'm ranking them as movies about parenting, I'm going Room number one, Carnage number two, and Panic Room number three, because I think there's a decent amount of mother daughter and family relationship type stuff in Panic Room, but I think Carnage really taps into it in a
Yeah.
way that a lot of movies don't, and obviously I think Room does in a very unique way, in a very unique story, and it really hits it out of the park in the parenting aspect when they bring in her mother and father and the stepfather as well. I think that really that brings it in. So I think that's kind of how I would do it, and that lens or that paradigm would change how I my rankings with regard to like how I would express this stuff like that. So yeah, would give me your two rankings then, Dustin.
Yeah, I would say movie wise, mine would be the same: Panic Room, Room, and then Carnage. I think that's what you said, right? Yeah. And then as far as parenting goes, and I'm sure some of this is couched by the fact that you are a parent. I am not a parent with no intention to be a parent. Um, and I would say Carnage, Room, then Panic Room, because I think as like a non-parent who has many friends who are parents, and is close with them as well. Like, I do like kids and like spending time with kids. I just find like the angle of parenting that Carnage covers to be one that I don't feel like is as heartily materialized in media as it is in Carnage, where it's like just the whole focus of it is truly the parents and like the dysfunction that comes amongst separate like sets of parents who do not. It's not like they're have any connection other than a interaction their kids had, and it was not a positive interaction that their kids had. And then Room, I think, as we talked at length about, like, that story of parenting is really good, and Panic Room, I think, yeah, like there's definitely things to be said about parenting and that, but it is not a core component of the film in the way it is as for the other two, for sure. Alex, how about you?
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of that. Talking just my generalized rankings, my number three would be Carnage, my number two would be Panic Room, and my number one would be Room, which I was surprised by how moved I was by this movie. And it's one where I think if you read the description of it and are kind of on the fence, uh, maybe roll the dice, give it a shot, because I was pleasantly surprised by how tender and powerful this was, given the subject matter, as we kind of talked about. Um, in terms of movies about parenting, I would say Panic Room is, like you guys, number three. I think it's very firmly in the subtext category in Panic Room, where it informs that relationship. Like, there's maybe some thematic stuff going on, but you kind of have to squint to see it. Whereas Carnage would be my number two, because there it's kind of clearly in the text. It's about these four parents, it's about their approaches to raising kids. Um, but I think there's a broadness to Carnage where it's also about other things. It's about ego, it's about the falseness of the social contracts. Whereas Room, I would put as the most effective movie about parenthood, because it is the fulcrum on which everything else operates. And it's really just so laser focused on that core relationship and the worlds that parents create for their children that, it was the most effective parenting movie for me in that regard.
Cool. Well, any parting words from either of you, sirs? Otherwise, I think that's about it for this episode.
Check
Yeah,
out these
yeah,
movies. They were all
yeah.
worth watching. I'm glad we saw them for the
Yeah.
pod.
Yeah. Live long in movie, friends. Live long in movie.